What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Stream Key Podcast. This is our weekly show here at TRUgaming, where we help you level up your streaming game each week. Today, we're excited to come out to you for the first time from our new studio. Finally, it's ready. And today, I'm really excited because we have a very requested topic and guest on this week, which is Ernest Jones, who's a CPA, is here with me today in the studio. Ernest, how's it going, man?
Good. How you guys doing today?
Good, good. Thanks for coming on today again, being with us. And yeah, guys, for those of you who don't know, we're talking about Twitch taxes today and streaming taxes in general, really. But this is a great topic for right now because tax season is in full brew, and a lot of people are asking about Twitch taxes. It's not my area of expertise, but luckily we have Ernest here today who has a lot of experience there. So we're going to get into that. For those of you who have not seen the show before, the way this works is the first 40 minutes or so will be me and Ernest just talking back and forth about kind of his background, some of my own questions with taxes, and the last 20 minutes of the show, so at about 11:40, we will be doing Q&A. So if you guys have more specific questions for your stream, you can ask Ernest about that at that time or any other streaming related questions. So save your questions till then. But to start off really quickly, Ernest, can you just kind of tell us about yourself, what your whole background is and what you kind of do related to Twitch?
Sure. So I got my undergrad and master's from UNLV. That's the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. So go Rebels! We won last night against Boise State. Um,
Ooh.
so they're terrible, but it's fine. Um, and so I made my bones kind of the traditional way a CPA does, or an accountant in public accounting, at a small kind of local training firm, and I did that for 5, 6-ish years. Went corporate for a couple of years to try kind of a different career path. Wasn't a good fit for me. And then from there, went back to public accounting, kind of threw myself into the tax world more so than I had in my last public accounting gig, and did that for 5 years. And then from there, I kind of at the same time was reaching out into the Twitch space and finding clients because I saw a niche uh, for people who would need tax prep in this industry, and I'm familiar with Twitch, and so that's a little bit on me.
Gotcha. Cool. So you were more traditional, but you just when did you kind of move to? I saw on your LinkedIn. Did you move to full time this year with Twitch stuff?
So it's always something I've kind of done. Um, for Twitch stuff, I was building the client. So I've been involved in the space professionally for about 4 years now, and it's just been a bigger and bigger part of my client base. And so I went kind of um, full time on my own this past January. So um, solo shop, kind of doing that. And Twitch is still a large part of it, but I still have some traditional clients to backfill. It's funny. I will often get questions from broadcasters and they need tax help for a friend or something, and they have the idea that, well, this person, they're not on Twitch or any other kind of streaming service or content creation, and it's like, can you do their taxes? um so yeah, it's like, of course I can.
Yeah. Awesome. So that's really cool though, because I'm sure as Twitch continues to grow and Mixer and YouTube, all these places, there will only be more need for people who have expertise there. And I can even see that with my own show. Just all these people asking more and more about taxes. So the need's going to be there for a long time, I'm sure.
I'm hoping
Um,
so.
yeah, I think you're in the right business there. So really quickly
until
though,
until the robots come and automate me out of a job,
right,
right?
yeah, hopefully it won't be too soon. We'll see. But so quickly for those listening, you're involved in something called Streamer Square. Do you want to kind of explain that too before we kick it off here?
Yeah, absolutely. So Streamer Square is a educational website and channel on Twitch, and it's essentially informational in that if you need help with um, your setup, or things to improve your stream, or just general knowledge, and it's all available to you to kind of use and improve your stream, and just a great resource where um, you can get information about streaming. And so I'm involved with a show on there on Monday afternoons at 3:30 Pacific, 6:30 Eastern, and it's called Your Brand, Your Business. And me and my best bud, Galen, we talk about all these various business topics. We have guests on, and it's kind of similar to this, where we pick a topic and we kind of wax poetic for about an hour on it. And they also have shows on, I think, Monday before us and on Tuesday or on Wednesday. So check it out if you're interested in, diving deeper on the stream setup stuff.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, I met Galen. I talked to him. He might be coming on the show after you in a couple weeks or
Oh,
so.
perfect.
Do like
My
more of a
better half.
financial planning thing. Yeah. So we're gonna. It might turn into like a business development month for this podcast.
Mm.
It's looking like it. I talked to another guy who's doing trademark stuff. So just going all around everything this month.
Oh yeah, you got to get your attorney.
Yeah,
You
for
got
sure.
to,
Gotta
but you started with
round
the
it out.
best, the CPA.
Yeah, I guess the best comes first, of course.
Of course, of course. That's how that saying goes.
Yep. All right. So kicking off into the real tax stuff, the meat and potatoes here. You talked a little bit about your history of being a CPA and how you got into here, but kind of what has your experience been with uh, Twitch in particular tax stuff? Are there, I don't know if you can disclose certain people that you've worked with or just kind of like the stuff that you tend to help people with specifically when they are looking for help.
Sure. So, since we're transitioning to the meat and potatoes of it, disclaimer, anything I talk about here is considered general advice and not specific to your exact situation. This isn't establishing a relationship where I said this and you got to file this on your return. This isn't direct advice to you. It's considered general and educational in nature. So, having said that, I can't say who I work with. I just don't like doing that because, as part of that, is you have a lot of sensitive information as a tax CPA. So, if you're a US citizen, you have, I'm sure people know this, a social security number, an address, phone number, um, and then tax documents coming from suppliers or sponsors. So, a lot of sensitive information. But what I can say is that I've worked with, and it's now in terms of broadcasters, game developers, and industries adjacent to the space, or, supporting industries. Um, Probably anywhere from 50 to 75 people I've worked with in terms of client base,
Wow.
ranging from big to small. So we're talking, revenue numbers of and that's the top line before expenses in the low three quarters of a million, all the way down to 50,000. And so what
Wow.
I do specifically is three kind of tiers: tax planning. So, kind of figuring out what we can do to minimize tax legally. No, we're not doing anything shady. Um, Through structure, general business consulting type stuff, tax compliance. So, that is actually filing the return and handling that aspect of it, and then litigation support. So I have someone going through an audit right now, and so we're assisting with that.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's more you do a lot of specific stuff with people, but I noticed you also do a lot of general advice, which again, I saw a disclaimer on your Twitter, everything is general. It's not specific for you. I'm sure that happens a lot with people taking it too seriously.
Yeah, so the issue with that is I don't want to get sued. And so the key thing is I don't want people to think that anything I give in a public space, I want to help people, my DMs are open. And so just last night and the other day, I got a couple questions that were pretty general in nature. And I say, like, look, this is what I would do. These are my thoughts on it. But never do I say, this is what you need to do. This is what you should do. Uh, that happens when you hire me.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's an important disclaimer you already mentioned, but for this whole show, it's going to be a mix. A lot of, we'll have specific questions, but a lot of it may not specifically apply to you. So hopefully that'll be something the Q&A will help with a little bit at the end if you have more specific things. And this will help you kind of think through where to start with a lot of the common questions that we get. But yeah, I saw you
One
did a
key
lot of,
thing, so,
go ahead.
sorry, one key thing is that, you can ask a specific question and I'll answer it generally in nature. But the key thing is that you have to look at your individual facts to that question and then your entirety of facts, because that's really what's going to dictate, the specific answer.
Right. Absolutely. Another good disclaimer. So yeah, I saw you did a lot of cool general advice too. I saw an AMA on Reddit you did a little while back, as well as a Medium post, and then the podcast. So it's great to see that you're also just giving out a lot of great public info for people, even independent of being a paid CPA. I think because that's another great need that people need, especially in the Twitch space. So I just want to highlight that. Is there anything else that I'm
Yeah. So,
missing there?
No, that's the big things. That Twitch AMA is how I met Galen actually. So it was a really good thing that I did. And it's funny because you mentioned that, and there was some conversation occurring. It always happens around this time of year on the Twitch subreddit, and it was kind of a feeding frenzy because there was a lot of information and a lot of infighting about how taxes should
Yes.
be and whether the value of it. Um, and then that AMA got like cycled in there, like, hey, check this out. Da, 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 da. So,
Huh.
um, and I think that thing was 2 years ago. Yeah, it's about 2 years old now.
Hmm. Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I saw what you're talking about too. I see that's another big piece of why I want to have you on is I feel like there are a lot of self-proclaimed experts in this stuff, especially in I'm a
On the
whatever.
internet.
Yes,
There are a lot
exactly.
of
Everyone's like,
self-proclaimed
well,
experts. Yeah.
I talked to my CPA. You can write all this stuff off, and I know exactly what to do here. And then you'll see someone respond, well, I'm also a CPA, and you're wrong. And so I want to make sure that like we have that disclaimer out. And kind of my thought is like, what would you say to people who aren't sure where to go because there's all these different conflicting opinions about where you can get an actual correct opinion on navigating taxes?
So if it's for a specific kind of, hey, can I write this off? Can I deduct this? Yada yada. I would not go to the internet. I just wouldn't, because you're going to do your search and you're going to find, yes, I can, no, I can't. Well, maybe, yes, I can, no, and just it's just going to go in a round. What I would do is I would try to find a professional. Most of us, CPAs typically do free consults. I know I try to make myself available to answer these questions. Um, maybe go to your corner store, the tax like H&R Block or something, talk to them about it. The problem, and part of the reason I got into the space, was that I've working with clients, a lot of the conversations we've had, and kind of my edge is that you're going to have to explain what Twitch is. As big as it's gotten, as big as YouTube has gotten, there's this there's this technical kind of barrier for the everyday person that they just don't get how revenue is generated and how money would be spent to generate that money. So that's why you end up having these issues with deductions, because people are applying a kind of a general rule set to the niche business that is broadcasting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that you mentioned even just going down and going to your local H&R Block, because that was another one of my big questions is like, where do you find people? Because you always hear go find your local professional, but like, how do you practically do that? It sounds like it's a lot easier than you would think it would be. Like just to either go down somewhere close to you, even though they might not know a lot about Twitch, or find someone like you online who maybe don't have to leave the house.
Yeah, so when you're looking for a professional, my key thing is that I tell people this all. There are plenty of people who can do what I do. There are people smarter than me and dumber than me that are doing this. And the key thing is that you got to find someone that you feel comfortable with. Number one, that you should have good feelings after you talk with them, or at least okay feelings. And after that, you should you should feel that they may not be able to answer all your questions, but that they will be honest with you and tell you, hey, I don't know this, or I have to do some research. That's the key thing I found when you're looking for a professional. It's kind of, if you go to a doctor, you should feel good going to your doctor. You should
Right.
feel a comfort level that they have the knowledge and they're going to take care of you.
Right, because I mean, at the end of the day, it's they're helping you manage your money, right? In a sense, so it's important that you
Hmm.
trust that person with your money, in a sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's this kind of running gag is that people, because when you do people's taxes, you see kind of the whole thing. You see all of their income, you see all of their expenses. People ask me like, hey, do you think I'm spending too much? And it's very personal in nature, especially in the US and kind of our culture. It's a very secretive type thing. I mean, especially in older generations, and it's a source of pride and embarrassment, and it's just all these emotions attached to the things that happen with tax.
Mm-hmm. Right, absolutely. I could see that a lot. Okay, so let's with all those disclaimers out of the way, let's start transitioning now into kind of like your recommendations generally for a lot of the hot topics that I see
Sure.
in the space. First of all, for someone who's brand new to streaming, who maybe just got into it this year, and they didn't even, I was talking to someone today who didn't even realize they had to file taxes being on Twitch and they made money. So, like, for someone in that situation who just found out about Twitch and taxes, what would you say to that person? What are the most important things to focus on when you're starting out?
Okay, so I'll probably stop me after I kind of go through the windup. So number one, um, you need to file a return. And it's a best practice kind of thing because what happens is um, when you file a return, you create a position with the IRS. Now, what happens is, assuming you did it mostly correct, that creates a 3-year window for them to come back and look at it. So that's a key aspect of filing a return. Um, and another thing I get a lot of are donations. I refer to them as tips. I always correct myself if I do call them donations, but
Hmm.
are those taxable? Those are my friends giving me money. No, it's not. That's not the
Hmm.
case. I had a long back and forth conversation with someone who's doing really well for themselves, who didn't kind of keep their stuff compliant. And the question was, I don't have to pick these up and no one else does. So why should I? And they were at the point where a lot of tax documents were generated. And I had to walk them through, like, look, here it is. The IRS knows that you've gotten this information. Um, I don't know why you haven't, why you haven't got noticed, but you need to file.
Wow. Okay. So that was actually a quick thing too. Is one common thing is the tips versus donations piece. Does that matter what you call it? Is it just semantics?
It's semantics. So
Okay.
ultimately, as a broadcaster, um, all your forms of revenue, whether it be your Twitch subs and ad share, whether it be YouTube AdSense, whether it be um, direct donations into a PayPal account, whether it's a Streamlabs cuts because whatever, people donate a lot on credit cards to you. All of that gets pooled together into a single pot, and that's your revenue for the year.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's a great one. If you guys were wondering, it doesn't really matter what you call it. Just make sure you report it. That's what I'm hearing here. So speaking of, so with brand new streamers, your stance is, make sure you file whatever you're earning essentially. So does that mean
Correct.
that you don't believe that there's any sort of point where you should start reporting, like, reaching $100 total, reaching 1,000?
So there is a threshold for this. So let's say you're in college, as an example, and you kind of do this for fun and kind of beer money, right? I played poker online for beer money um, in college. So let's say the actual filing requirement is if you make $400 as a self-employed person, because that's what you are as a broadcaster.
Hmm.
Now, something interesting is that depending the reporting threshold for you to receive a 1099 from Twitch, as an example, would be 600. So you may not get a tax document. And big picture, there's practical advice, right? If you don't pick up $400 on the return, I'm trying to think, your exposure there is probably $80 in tax. Not the end of the world, but I have people that you may get an IRS letter, and then people start freaking out and thinking, "Oh my God, I'm going to jail." So, and honestly, if you have that low threshold, um, you should have enough expenses to offset that income and not owe any taxes.
Right. That makes sense. Okay, so that's interesting though because that's another piece where I've heard a lot of different things on what is the threshold where you have to report it. Maybe that's something that varies by state or by country. I'm not totally sure on that, but is that the
Yeah. So
case?
so the IRS threshold is if you made $400 being self-employed, you have to file taxes. Um, but you have to look at kind of practical enforcement. So the requirement is that it's 400, but if you're right at that threshold, I'm not saying you should not file. Again, best practice is to file. However, kind of your own risk and exposure level is low. Like, say you blew up on multiple platforms this year and you made 300,000. I'm going to tell that person, and I'm going to shake them by the collar. Hey, you need to file. This is a big deal. The $400 person, yeah. I'm still going to say you should file, but I'm not going to, accost them and, say like, hey, you're ruining your life by not doing this.
Sure.
There are levels to it.
Right. And actually, you mentioned a good point there too. Is that so? I guess the payout threshold for Twitch is 600, but technically you should start reporting after 400. So there's that 200 gap where you don't get a form, but you're still supposed to file. I think it's important people to know
Correct.
that. Yeah.
So there's a requirement with your earnings. If so, say I hire someone to do art for me, and it's overlays and emotes and all of this great stuff. I love their work and they do great work for me, and I pay them $600 for the year. Technically, under the guidance, I need to issue them a 1099. So what
Hmm.
that means is what a 1099 is. It's a form saying I, my business or my social has paid X person or business $600, right? And what it does is it has identifying information with my business address, their identifying social security number or EIN, which is an EIN is just a business social security number, stands for employee identification number. Now,
Hmm.
what happens is a copy of that 1099 goes to the individual who received the money. So Ben, say I sent you the money, right? So I send you the 1099, and then a copy of that also gets filed with the IRS. So the IRS is aware that I paid you $600. And
Hmm.
then what'll happen is if you don't pick that up on your return anywhere, the IRS system, as old and antiquated as it is, will do a matchmaking process and say, oh, well, he didn't pick up $600 on his return. Let's send a notice and say, hey, we didn't see this. We think you owe us this. Is this right? Let us know. And then
Hmm.
it kind of starts a compliance process. So that's what happens if a 1099 gets issued to you. Now, that's why there's that issue with like compliance. And I'm not sure if you saw uh, Twitch is late on getting 1099s to people. And if they did get one, they're saying don't use that one, wait till February.
Hmm.
Now, one quick thing is that say you don't get a 1099, there's a rule in tax called the burdens on the taxpayer. So what that means is, in a court of law, the burdens on the prosecution to prove the defendant guilty, right? You're innocent till proven guilty. Not true with tax. You're
Hmm.
actually guilty till proven innocent. So what that means is you are required to report all of your revenue under the law, even if you don't get a tax document, right?
Hmm.
Those rules are in place to kind of give sight into what's going on in the general businesses in the United States. But um, even if that didn't exist, the law states that you are required to report all of your revenue. So don't think, just because someone says like I didn't get a 1099, I don't have to report this. That's not true. It just
Yeah.
makes it harder for them to find it and catch you. But that does not, exclude you from your tax filing requirements.
Right. Now, those are all really good points. I did see the thing about Twitch with getting the 1099s out late. We're going to talk
Yep.
about that tomorrow on this show, actually. But
Oh,
yeah, so if you
perfect.
guys, and I didn't realize though, if you had already gotten one, they said to wait on the next one. Uh,
Yeah, there's a link. I forget where. I'll
I
post it in
have
the
it in,
chat.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
it's in the
And what it
Discord.
is, it says, if you did get one, wait.
Mm,
Um, and what I say is you should be waiting until you get your revised one. You can do your taxes and just wait to file, but um, definitely wait until it comes through.
right. I just found the link. I'm going to post it in the chat for anyone who's watching if you want to go check it out. That looks like you did too, maybe. Uh,
Yep.
cool. So that's just important to mention. And also, the fact of issuing 1099s to other people is big. Because you mentioned like art and overlay stuff like that, but it could be video editors, it could be
Yep.
managers, whatever you're
Yep.
doing that you're paying people for. That's probably something to look into, because I don't know many streamers at all that do that, and
No,
probably
no one does. No
yeah.
one does. No, I can tell you definitively. So,
Okay.
I mean, obviously, my client base isn't, representative of the whole. It's only a sample. No, no one issues 1099s though.
Mm,
And there's some reasons for that though. So there's this confusing rule where if you pay someone through PayPal, you don't issue them a 1099 technically. because PayPal is considered a merchant service account, a merchant service. So it's like a credit card. And what happens is if you hit a threshold, say you're really successful, and I think I always butcher the two requirements, but it's if you run 20,000 through your PayPal and you have 250 transactions, they will issue you what's known as a 1099K. And what that shows is how much got processed through your PayPal. Technically, you aren't supposed to issue a 1099 if you pay someone that way. And the reason for that is double counting, because you may
Hmm.
end up getting the 1099. So my example is, and this happens with a lot of broadcasters. So this is kind of a key issue for them. A lot of people have their Twitch subs and bits and ad share deposited directly into PayPal. If you hit that threshold, 20K, 250 transactions, and you can think like if you have a very active community, a lot of small tips come through and you can hit the 250 transactions pretty easily in a
Hmm.
year, right? That's essentially less than one tip a day.
Hmm.
So what happens is Twitch will issue the 1099 to you personally, and then let's say you're at the PayPal threshold and they issue that as well. What it looks like is, let's say Twitch issued you 5,000 and then PayPal issues you a document for 20. Well, what it looks like to the IRS is that it's actually you received 25,000 when in actuality the
Hmm.
20,000 in PayPal is inclusive of that 5,000. So that's
Hmm.
been a big issue in terms of reporting that on your tax return. And so those
Hmm.
thresholds are, I think, and you can look it up, 1099K thresholds, but it's 20,000 in a year of money in and 250 transactions.
Right. Huh. Wow. Well, that's something to be aware of. I'm sure for some people, they're probably getting close. I guess, like you said, the 250 transactions adds up pretty quick, especially for a lot
Yep.
of small donations. So that's definitely something to be aware of for people,
I
for
would
sure.
hope if you've decided to take the plunge and go full time, I'm not one to judge anyone's lifestyle. Hopefully, I've run away, but that you're hopefully clearing at least 20,000. Um, just because people got to live, you got to eat.
Right.
So,
Somehow, for sure. Um, cool. Well, so let's get back into some more of the stuff. We'll probably segue back into this a little later. So the most requested topic I had by far was write-offs, and everyone's always asking about what can you write off, what can't you write off. Do you? I'm sure you get asked about it a lot yourself. What's kind of your take?
yeah. So, the reason I get asked that a lot, and the other way it gets asked is like, how do I keep my tax low? Um, so, when people refer to write offs, they're talking about um, expenses, right? So we spent a lot of the top or earlier talking about revenue and 1099s and all that stuff, right? So I'm gonna go into my standard kind of business pitch when it comes to write-offs and expenses. So just so everyone knows, there's no guidebook. The IRS doesn't write down for every business that exists what a valid business expense is. And the reason for that is because it's impossible. um, because I want you to just take a moment and think about all of the businesses that used to exist that are no longer highly, highly prevalent. Candle makers, right? We used to light street lamps with, I think, kerosene or a
Yeah,
fuel
oil.
to oil lanterns, right? Twitch is only something new in the past 10 years. And I would argue that it's only something where you can make a good living in the last three or four.
Yeah,
Uber, Lyft, those aren't things that were around. I mean, they were in the form of taxis, but they're still different. Um, the internet, I mean, I was probably on it in 93, 94. And so think of, all the things that have happened in the past 30 years. And so all of that goes to say there's a two-pronged test for determining what a business expense is. And it's called ordinary and necessary. You have to meet both of those criteria for it to be considered a
hmm.
valid business expense. So, what does that mean? The way I like to explain it is it's not the clinical definitions of those words, right? Because if you like bring out your dictionary and you're like necessary, I have to spend this, right? No, that's not what it means. It's, is it helpful to the business and is it common in the industry? So kind of use that as your benchmark for determining if it's a business expense. Is it helpful, and is it common in the industry?
Hmm. Gotcha. Okay. So this is another thing I've heard a lot of different talks about. And I had a lot of specific questions about certain things to write off. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll just list them off to you really quickly and kind of get your
Yep.
thoughts on them.
Sure.
So,
Let's do it. Lightning round.
sweet. Yep. One of the biggest ones is actually spending money on Twitch on other people. So, buying bits or subs for other streamers as a networking business expense. Is that viable?
Subscriptions, I would say 100% are an expense. My caveat would be you love everyone and you subscribe yourself into a loss for the year. So you're spending 5,000, a month, 60,000 a year. Unless you are one of the top 10 people on Twitch, I think that's a little weird. So what I say is you have to look at it from the macro perspective and the micro perspective. So if
Hmm.
you said to me, "Hey, this is what I do. I subscribe to these other streamers. It costs me $5 a month. It's kind of a networking tool, so I get my name out there. And like we all play games together, and we have a community. And it's kind of like I host them, they host me, yada yada yada. Yeah, that sounds like a business expense.
Hmm.
And then it's like, well, I make 20,000 a year, and I spend 60,000 a year in subscriptions. I think we can still expense it, but I'm going to have a talk with you about your general business sense and kind of our exposures here because now it looks more like a hobby. And I think the same thing applies to bits, right? It's just a matter of, I spend $500 in bits on the year. I kind of do it as a kind of a way to say what's up, um, to people and kind of network and market and advertise myself. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's valid. I think that's a business expense. And we went through it. I mean, so my perspective on it is I've gone through an audit and I've sold this. And by that I
Hmm.
mean I've worked with an IRS auditor, explained what the person did, and said, "Look, these subscriptions are this. This is why we're doing it. This is what it is." And they were like, "Yeah," they signed off on it.
Hmm.
Now, that does not mean that is an approved expense for that to be like legally for that to happen. They would have to disagree. I would have to fight it, and we'd have to run that all the way up to tax court, and then a legal opinion would have to be rendered on
Right.
it, and it would probably be very narrow. So this isn't guidance for you to say like I can absolutely take my subscriptions, but I think is strong evidence that I have from having done this that says you can.
Right. So you've had direct experience with subscriptions of having done that, having sold to uh, someone from the IRS. Again, not legal law that you can write it off, but there is precedent for it, is what I'm hearing, basically.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, that's surprising to me actually. I'm sure a lot of people do this, but I guess the caveat, like you said, is to make sure you're actually using it as a business expense and not as like a way to make excuses for spending all that money. If that makes sense,
Hmm.
you're still actually
Yep.
trying to run a business at the end of the day and not just losing all that money.
Exactly.
Right, for sure. Awesome. Okay. Next big one is events. So things like TwitchCon, PAX, when you're going to events to network and grow your streaming business. Can you write those things off?
No question. Absolutely. Um,
Awesome.
now, kind of I know it's lighter now. Before we go too deeper, though, is I mentioned hobby rules, right? Say in that example I was talking about, if you have other forms of income or you're independently wealthy, right? And you're spending at a loss in your business, the IRS may come back and say you're doing this as a hobby. This isn't actually a for profit venture. And so that follows a completely different rule set. So when I say um, absolutely, I'm saying you're trying to do this to turn a profit. You may
Right.
be doing this kind of as a side hustle for fun, or it may just be a hobby, and you just kind of want to, you want to see the point total go up in Mario, right? It doesn't actually mean anything, it doesn't get you anything extra, but you just want to see that, hey, I have revenue, people support me, this is cool. You know, if it's for a for-profit venture, then that's what the answers to these questions is
Hmm.
applicable to.
Gotcha. So pretty much across the board. I mean, I'm guessing it's the same thing with the rest of the questions, which are, buying games or gear or, emotes, which are all for the purpose of your stream, right?
Correct.
The bottom line is, are you doing this with the goal of eventually getting the business to be profitable and pay for itself, sort of, where you're not just sinking money and not building a business in the meantime. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. So what are you spending money on to make money? Right? So you're a
Mm-hmm.
broadcaster. You're spending money on your equipment, your setup, your mic, your internet. Um, if you've turned that corner, you're probably on your phone all the time, managing Twitter, managing your Discord, managing your community. So a portion, if not all of your phone bill should be allocated to the business. You've got your internet, games you spend, microtransactions, um, all those things that you can directly draw a line to between money you spent to things you use in your broadcast, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you're going to go play Apex Legends, you're going to go buy the Pathfinder skin. So you're going to go do that. You're playing it, people are donating and you're getting subs because the game's hot right now. That's an expense.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah. So I think that's really just a great overview of write-offs in general. So thank you for I'm glad you have a direct experience with that, with subscriptions and things too, because I
Mm-hmm.
love having that precedent to go off of. And if people have more specific questions about this at the Q&A, that'd be a great thing to ask about as well. So if you guys have more, just hang tight for a bit. Okay, so this is going real quick. I'm gonna try and get to some of the last things here, and then jump into
I
Q
tend
and
to
A
I
for
tend to go off
last.
on tangents and I'm long. I apologize.
Sorry, what'd you say?
I said I tend to go off on tangents and I'm long-winded. I mean, actually keeping it pretty short
Yeah,
for my
I can
normal
send. No,
stuff. So.
it's good. It's good. And this is the type of thing that would probably take multiple episodes to get through anyway. But we'll
Mm-hmm.
do what we can with this one for sure. Okay, so I want to kind of wrap up the one-on-one because I think Q and A is gonna be really big for people here. So I guess sort of the last thing would be from me, for someone who again is just getting into this, is being overwhelmed by taxes and doesn't know, should I write stuff off, should I form an LLC, just overwhelmed by everything. What is kind of like the biggest piece of advice you give to people to navigate all of this?
So on the LLC question, I get that a lot. Unless you are very profitable and you're like, I would say you're at the point where, man, I'm broadcasting. This is great. I'm full time, but man, I'm paying a lot in taxes, and you may want to, you're doing activations and your sponsorships. You may want to protect yourself legally with an LLC. I would say once you get your first actual activation, and I mean not just an affiliate deal where, use my code and blah, blah, blah. I mean, you're getting paid to play a game or promote something, or I would say you need to start thinking about an LLC just for the legal protection, not a lawyer. Um, but that's something you should consider. In terms of hey, how do I just keep this all sorted? Is people tend to get overwhelmed when it comes to taxes, so I would say take a step back and just breathe and talk to some friends. I'm sure you have someone in your life who is self-employed or used to have a side hustle or has a side hustle and can talk to you about how they address their taxes, and then from there kind of take that information, apply it to yourself, make sure it kind of makes sense. um, do some research on the internet and get some sources there, but I would not consider any of that you find authoritative. That's just a way to get ideas, and then from there, you know go find a professional if you're still not comfortable, right? Go to H&R, or go to look up your local CPA. There are dozens of us, dozens.
Mm-hmm.
So
Literally.
yeah, literally dozens. That's for the Arrested Development fans. Um, and get feedback from them. And then if you just because a lot of us will do free consults. My DMs are open, like I said. I'll try to answer a quick question. This time of year is rough, um, but that's what I would say, and just deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it'll be if it is a problem for you, it'll only be exacerbated from not dealing with it, right?
Right.
It's sort of like, just deal with the problem.
Right.
Take some
And
time,
this,
figure it out.
yeah, and the sooner that you kind of start on it, the more time you have to figure it out, right? It's bad if you wait to the last minute to do it, but if you kind of start early on and give yourself a few months to kind of process it all, then it won't be so overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no time like the present, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
a turn of phrase for a reason.
for sure. Awesome. And hopefully the stuff we talked about so far will be helpful to people, especially new streamers who might be overwhelmed. Maybe you're not at that 400 threshold anyway, and it's not really as big of a deal as you would think anyway. But let's get into Q&A really quickly here. So if you guys have questions for our friend Ernest here or myself about taxes, now's the time to ask. So go ahead and tag at TRUgaming in the chat with any of your questions, and we will answer those now. Saw one here from I hope I can say this right. Decrash. What about doing it as a side hustle until it takes off and becomes profitable?
I'm going to say that's decrache because
yeah.
a person of culture. So even if it's a side hustle, it's still something you have to report. And so whether you're full time or not, your reporting requirements are still the same. So if you hit that 400 threshold, you have a requirement. You probably have a filing requirement anyway if you have a main hustle. So it's probably an employment. You're probably owed a refund, probably. So I'd want to pick that stuff up, and I'd want to, look at kind of what your last filings look like, what your current filing looks like, and pivot from there.
Right. Absolutely. Cool. So Megiddo Moonblaze in the chat said, I made 376 last year in payouts, very close to 400. And I'm not submitting a 1099 for it. I wouldn't be able to claim expenses for it, would I?
Yes, you would.
Mm.
So the thing we talked about earlier, whereas if you don't receive a document, you still have a report, a tax filing requirement. The same rule applies. If you have valid business expenses that are attached to that 376, then you can absolutely claim it.
Awesome. There you go, Megiddo. Okay, so another one from Decrash, you said, I think? Is that how I say it?
Decrache.
I'm working on it here. Said, related to that, I've heard that the 1099 can negatively affect W-2 earnings. Can you suggest how to mitigate that?
So the reason it negatively affects W-2 earnings is this. So what happens with the W-2 is typically the tax is taken out as you go. So your employer is withholding taxes, that's called withholding tax, and that goes to address your overall tax liability. Now, what happens is a 1099 doesn't have that withholding. So what happens is you have this bump in income and associated tax with it. So that ends up increasing your tax liability. So that's the negative impact I think the person is referring to.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is you need to find expenses that are valid, ordinary and necessary, that you can apply to those 1099 earnings to reduce the amount you're actually being taxed on, because you're actually only taxed on the net income. So that's the sum of the 1099s, your gross earnings, less your expenses. So if that number is zero, as an example, your net income from the business is zero, it would not have what we're referring to as a negative impact on your W-2 earnings.
Okay. Decrache. Hopefully that helps you out, man. And hopefully I can say your name right or you figure out how you want it pronounced. Okay, question from Heedhom730. My question is just to get a quick sum up. You shouldn't try and write things off unless you're making 20K a year. I don't think that's...
No. So what happens is you should try to, if you have valid business expenses, you should take it. But if you've tried to make broadcasting a full-time thing or a side hustle for 5 years, these are called the hobby rules. And in 4 of those last 5 years, you are in a loss position, meaning you've spent more on the business than you've brought in, then you really should be looking at it from a documentation standpoint and proving that you're in this to make profit. Because at that point, you're not allowed to create we were talking before the show, like I've streamed kind of as a for fun with my friends, and I could start right. I've not made a single dime, but I could, in theory, on those broadcasts, allocate some expenses to those few things. And what would happen is I would have a loss and it would offset my other income. Well, if I'm doing that, that's against IRS rules. So the bigger point is that you shouldn't be doing this to create a loss to offset other income, But if you have income and you have valid expenses, you should do it. It's just if you're in loss positions year over year, you're going to want to button up your documentation and prove that it's for profit if that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, you be careful about how you do that and make sure that you. Again, I think that's important because there are probably a lot of hobbyist streamers who kind of do this and don't really think through, eventually trying to get it to be a business that pays for itself and is at a profit, right? So I think
Correct.
it's important that we mention that for sure. Absolutely. All right. So good question, Heatham. I think you have a follow up, but let me know. Impending Duff said, as a creative streamer, I also deal in commissions. Do I need to to LLC either of my entities? Is it wiser to act as a streamer and a commission studio in one? There's a lot of questions here, but basically, both a streamer and does commissions as a creative person. So can those be the same thing? They can be separate. What do you think about that?
So one thing we should have said, and this is my fault, is that doesn't cross the line, but try not to make your questions too specific to your situation, because you
Mm,
don't want to air all that stuff out here. But that one's not bad. That's a good question. Um, so again, LLC is kind of a two-tier consideration. It's a legal consideration, and it's also a tax structure, tax savings potentially. But you always set it up for the legal protections first.
mm,
Um, you can have all of that activity grouped under one kind of Schedule C and one sort of filing one LLC. Because essentially, if what I'm hearing is it's a creative broadcaster who also, I'm guessing, likely streams their when they're doing a commission, right? So that you could argue that's all kind of one net activity.
mm.
So again, find expenses that are applicable. So I'm going to say this person is an artist. So your Adobe, your Photoshop, your whatever tools you're using,
For just
that would be
physical
applicable
painting.
to expenses. Physical painting, so your
Yeah.
supplies, your Edsel, your canvas, brushes, shipping to the person. Then those are all expenses that can help reduce your taxable income, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
you want to find those valid expenses. That's, I guess, one huge takeaway is find your valid business expenses and use that to reduce any revenue you have.
Mm. Awesome. Duff, hope it helps you out, man. If you have follow up stuff, let us know. Megiddo Moonblaze in chat says, things like equipment could be considered expenses. Can people claim the games they use for the business? So, we talked about equipment, but do games fall under that category too?
Yes. So I would say yes, generally. You know, because so I'm thinking I'm wearing my, like, I'm talking to a person's hat, right? This is full time. This is their only gig. And so I've had discussions with them where they'll play a game, they'll buy it off stream, and I'm sorry, they'll buy it and they'll play it off stream and see if it's a good fit and if they'll have fun with it, and get their settings right for OBS and all that good stuff, right? And they end up playing it and they either don't have fun with it, or they don't think it's a good fit for the stream, or they never find a time to slot it in because of variety or what have you. That's still an expense, right? They were researching it, whether it would make sense for kind of their community and what they do, and it didn't. So it just didn't work out, right? So kind of apply, has a business ever spent money on something that didn't end up working out? Like they go to a sales conference in a city and they don't actually book a sale, right? That's kind of, I mean, it's not a one for one comparison, but it's the similar logic.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Good question, Megiddo. Again, I was expecting a lot of specific write off questions too. So if you guys have more of those, let us know. We can help you out a little bit. Mostly Ernest can help you out. I'll just write the questions. Wrapping up the show already. It's going really fast. A couple more questions. So if you guys have questions for us, now's the time to ask. Get them in quickly. Okay, so I think that is all the questions for now. I have a couple extra that I didn't quite have time to ask earlier.
Okay.
So we talked about tips and donations already and claiming. Okay, this is a good question we got. This is from Twitter. That was very specific and it goes way over my head. Are streamers eligible for the Section 199A 20% deduction?
Okay. So I will try to, I get this question a lot just traditionally with traditional clients. This is, in my opinion, so this new rule came about with TICJA, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that was passed by the current administration and prior Congress. Um, And essentially, what it is, it's a way for um, business owners to pay less in tax, because what they did was C corporations now pay a flat 21% in taxes. Before, it used to be kind of graduated rates like we individuals pay. And so, to make that fall more in line with that new 21%, they passed this new 20% 199A deduction. That's all background as to what this is and what we're talking about for the people who don't know. And the question was, hey, can I use this? Yes, but. And the yes, but is there's a lot of except fors and special considerations. Um, and so the exact numbers are for 2018, if your taxable income and you're an individual, you're not married filing joint, is 157,000 or less, then you can take the deduction, no problem, but you have to show a profit in your business, which would be the broadcast. If you're married, it's 207, I believe. You'll have to 207,000 before you start phasing out. And what a phase out is once you make a certain amount of money, you're no longer eligible for that deduction. So um, that's a very, very brief summary on it. But yes, you are possibly eligible. And the exception is it's one of the most, in my opinion, complicated new tax laws out there. But it's a very good deduction if you're eligible and if it's applicable. So I
Hmm.
would say yes, but do your research. And if you're at that point where you're trying to use it, I would say almost definitively need to be using a tax preparer of some sort to figure it out for you and help you through it.
Hmm. Gotcha. Thanks for the question, Stelter. Hopefully that helps you out, man. All right. Last couple questions here before we wrap it up. Follow up from Duff, who's the creative streamer, said, if I can expense tools and such, uh, talk about how detailed we should be with documenting our expenses and what we should be saving to bring to our tax prepper. Do I literally save every receipt that pertains to my art?
So you should be keeping every receipt, but let's talk practicality, right? So if you buy a $2 brush, not the end of the world if you don't have that receipt. Most tax preparers do not need that information. They do not need to bring a shoebox full of receipts. That's kind of our nightmare. What I would say is there are major categories of expenses, like supplies, for example. So I would group a lot of that stuff, like tools or small tools, under a single category and group it all under that. I wouldn't, when I'm reporting a return, I don't want to put a ton of detail in the category. So I don't want to, because what you can do is you can list out other expenses and classify them. So I've seen one where you'll put like Xbox points, microtransactions, Steam purchases, Origin purchases, um, Epic purchases,
Wow.
V Bucks, da 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 da, and they like go into this very granular, high level of detail, and then you look at the amount, and it's $10, $20, $50, $70, $2. Don't do that. So I would say kind of consolidate and report major categories, um, and have it roll up that way.
Gotcha. Cool. Duff, hopefully it helps you out, man. Last question I saw, which is a softball here, from Shadow Welder, said, what about travel for like TwitchCon? Talked about it earlier, but
No, absolutely. I would be considering those business expenses. They're business expenses for me, in full disclosure. So that's where I met. So Galen reached out to me. That's where I met Galen. That's where I met a lot of clients. It was client development. Um, so I think that's absolutely a valid business expense.
awesome stuff. All right, well, it is 12 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and start wrapping up the show. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you, Ernest, for coming on here and taking all these really specific questions and giving us some awesome advice. Is there anything you want to share to people who watch today where they can check you out, or just anything you want to plug?
Sure, absolutely. So you can find me on Twitter, twitter.com/warbnull. Sorry, my voice just went. Warbnull, WARBNULL. DMs are open if you have a quick tax question. I try to get back to it as fast as I can. Sometimes the deluge of information is too much. Weekly, Galen and I do a show on the Streamer Square channel. 3:30 Pacific, 6:30 Eastern. Your brand, your business. We talk about just general business health and considerations. We have a guest, I think, this upcoming Monday. We're going to be talking about working with agencies. So that should be a good show, hopefully, knock on wood. Um, and yeah, my website is my initials, epjcpa.com. There's contact information there. It's pretty a bare bone website. And yeah, thank you for having me. And thank you for everyone coming out and asking good questions. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for coming on. And yeah, if you guys like StreamKey, you'll definitely like Streamer Square because that's very similar kind of stream help stuff. And we're definitely gonna try to have Galen on pretty soon too to do more of like a general financial planning stuff for streaming. So yeah, guys, that's gonna be it from us. Thank you so much for coming out. If we missed your question, make sure to join the Discord, which hopefully someone will post in chat. We can answer your questions there, and you can always ask questions on social media, which we'll get to on the Friday shows. And speaking of, we'll be back tomorrow at 11 for Phone In Friday. Right out of here. Thank you guys for watching. We will see you next time.